Not me starting 2 videos in a row like this. But anyway, like a lot of you, I got the news today that the Queen of England had passed. And it just made me realize how quickly things move in the world, period. And so when you're talking about anything that has to do like with pop culture or current events, you got to kind of move quick. And the second that I found out she passed, I was editing this video and I found out she passed and I was like, yo, don't nobody care about this story no more. So instead of posting this as like a standalone video, I decided to drop it underneath my title of my new little series here on my channel. Does anyone still care about this? Although that wasn't the original intention, which is why you won't hear me say it in the video itself. You won't hear me say in this episode of Does Anyone Care About This? Because I initially didn't mean it for that. But again, like I said, once I found out that the Queen of England had passed, may she rest in peace, I was like, this is officially old news, even though I feel like the topics that I talk about here and the topics that Meghan herself covered in the podcast, both with Mariah and with Mindy, and I'm going to be talking about both episodes in this video. I feel like those topics are evergreen, but I do think that anything that is spoken about the royal family or anybody adjacent to it at this point is kind of old news, unless you're talking about the Queen's passing. So I just wanted to record this little intro here because that is something that happened today. And again, may she rest in peace. And now on to the video. Hello and welcome to my channel. So last week I posted a video where I gave my review, well, kind of a review, but I gave an opinion about the new Meghan Markle podcast, Archetypes, specifically her second episode of that podcast, where she talks about a lot. There was a lot that she talked about because I have since listened to it. And in that podcast, she gave she shared an opinion, or she shared an epiphany that she'd had about her treatment as a woman of a certain race and how that treatment had changed. She made the comment that when she started dating her husband, Harry, she was treated for the first time in her life as a Black woman. And then she said, that's when things really shifted. Now, as a Black woman who has never not been treated as a Black woman, that comment made me raise an eyebrow, and it made me feel a little bit of resentment towards Meghan Markle, who I had previously been like a diehard defender of. And you guys know me by now. I'm a very passionate speaker. I'm very passionate about a lot of things. And one of those things is when I like somebody, when I'm a fan of theirs, I am the type of I'm a keyboard warrior. I go hard in the paint. Okay, I will get on YouTube videos. I'll get in TikTok comment sections. I'll be in. I told y'all. I told you guys I read the Daily Mail, and I just want to say I read it for the gossip. But I also have had my comments flagged for going after racists in a very predatory way. I can get a little heated. And I once received like 32 violations in one day because I've noticed that there's a very, very thin line between racists and conservatives, people that call themselves conservatives. And during the remote learning period, a lot of conservative people had a really hard time with remote learning because it's hurting the economy. Teachers should be whatever. And I was a teacher during remote learning, and I just so happened to be teaching from a district where the pandemic, where COVID was just ravishing the communities. And so to hear these people that did not live that life and did not understand why it was a good thing to be able to provide children with this option of learning from home, and why it was a healthy thing, and why, every classroom was like, just basically this nuanced view that for a lot of people in that conservative umbrella, they weren't willing to take. I went off in the Daily Mail comment section, and I got flagged 32 times for my comments. And every time the email that I would receive would be like, your comment received a flag for da-da-da-da-da. And then I get another email that said, we found no issue with your comment. And so it kept happening over and over again. So just long story short, I read the Daily Mail. I know it's problematic, but I do read it because they do tend to be quick with their reporting. And for the most part, I just stay out of the comment sections because it's very racist, and it's usually really, really right-leaning in a scary way. in a scary way. But yeah, so I would be in those comment sections though, defending Meghan. And from my outsider point of view, because I am an American, by the way, I want to make that clear too with my analyzation of her or what happens with the royal family or, I'm an American person and we receive it one way and we have a certain connection to all of that. Well, I do anyway, and it's a very American connection. And so that being said, whenever she was going through what she was going through, I was just a big, big supporter. And a lot of that support had to do with the fact that Meghan was being called, and a lot of people view her as the first Black royal within that particular family system. And yes, I do know there are other Black royals within the EU, absolutely, or actually I think Britain has since left that. So again, I'm an American. I only know so much. But and I'm not as well versed as I should be. Being an American is not an excuse for being ignorant. But let's just say that you get my point. I think I know that Meghan is not the only Black royal within, the United Kingdom, within that area of the world. But I also know that it was a huge deal that she was thought of as being this Black princess and the first that this family had really seen and celebrated in this way. And I know that for a lot of Black Americans, for a lot of Black people, that was a big deal. It was a big deal. And we looked at her as being, well, I know at least I did. She is our Black princess. Now, I do also know that Meghan is biracial. I do know that she was raised by a Black mom. I do know that she has a white dad. And I do know that, if we're going to talk ethnicities here, because race is one thing and ethnicity is another thing. We're going to talk about ethnicities here. No, Meghan is not a Black woman. However, because of the way that Black people tend to, if you even have one Black parent 3 centuries ago, we will say, okay, well, that person's Black, because of how we tend to do that. And we tend to latch onto our own and bring them in. That's what I had done with Meghan, which is what I think a lot of people did. And so to turn around and hear her say, well, I had never been treated as a Black woman. There was a moment of cognitive dissonance for me. And then there was a moment of resentment. And that happened because, number one, what I realized was while I was giving Meghan all of this, putting her kind of up on this pedestal for being this person, she didn't think of herself that way. And rightfully so. She is a mixed race individual. But two, the resentment was from knowing that as a darker skinned Black woman who presents very monoracially, it doesn't matter what's actually in my ethnic makeup. Nobody is ever going to look at me and be like, are you mixed? Like, that's not going to happen. I understand that Meghan is allowed access and privileges into experiences that I will never have. And as a person who used to be extremely resentful of that, and who has since done a lot of inner work and whatever. I still, when she said that, I was like, ooh, that doesn't sit right with me. And so I made a video about it and I've gone back and watched it several times. And I think I explained my issue with it very well. I think I, number one, acknowledged that I knew the context from where the conversation was coming. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But I knew that she was a mixed race person talking to another mixed race person. That did not change my opinion, though. I knew that the whole show was not about that, and it was just a tiny little snippet that did not change my opinion. And I also was very open about the fact that I did not listen to the entire thing. And so if there were other things to be pulled from it, I absolutely would pull them. But again, that didn't change my opinion. And here's why. Like I said a couple seconds ago, the entire episode is not at all about it's not about race. Although it is a lot about race, it's not completely about race. If you haven't listened, the whole episode is about this concept of being a diva. And to stretch it out even further, the whole episode is about something that I did talk about in my video that I posted last week. The whole episode is about how you react to being othered in a specific way. And I am so excited that she had Mariah Carey on to talk about that because that language did not come from Meghan. Meghan wanted to talk about the word of a diva and being a diva because we know that that is a criticism that she's experienced. And so she wanted to explore, why that was such a bad label. Like you could really see through where the inspiration for the episode came from. But
Mariah was the one that brought in the concept of othering, and how her diva personality was a direct reaction to the extreme way she felt she was othered as a child. And I thought that that was interesting because after listening to the first episode with Serena and then the third episode with Mindy, which I'm going to get into at the end of this video, because that one I was like, I needed to hear it. But I honestly think Meghan should have called her podcast Othered, because that's literally the entire concept behind what she's trying to do. And I really did respect that after listening to it. But anyway, so she talks about this othering, and they come together on this many times. And like I said, it was supposed to be about divas, but they kept coming back to this, or at least Mariah Carey did, because like I said, to her, the thing she's been called a diva for, wanting to live in luxury, wanting to be surrounded by certain types of things, wanting to make sure that, so on and so forth. She has these attitudes because of the fact that she was made to feel like an other through poverty, because of the fact that she was made to feel like, she didn't really belong because of her race, because of the fact that she was made to feel like an other when she was in her relationship with Tommy Mottola, and it was so smothering, and, she couldn't even really be her true self. And so the divaness, this absolute necessity for being seen as who she is and being seen and uplifting herself, comes from feeling severely like she was on the outside of things. And it reminded me actually of the fact that Mariah wrote like my childhood anthem. I used to sing this at the top of my lungs when I was in the 8th grade, but it's a song called Outside, which Mariah actually brought up in the podcast. And I mean, that song still comes to mind in my adult life. The line, you'll always be somewhere on the outside. Like it sticks with me. It sticks with me. And so I kept noticing, like, wherever Meghan would try and take it and talk about being a diva, Mariah was like, yeah, but I'm a diva because I was made to feel like I didn't belong. And I was like, I understand that. And so after listening to the podcast, one thing I realized was that, Meghan's comment did not have malicious intent, although I never said it did. But her comment did not have malicious intent, which is why I think a lot of people that saw my video were like, why did that piss you off? She was just speaking openly and honestly, and she didn't mean anything by it. And I just want to bring it back to something that I've said here before. Impact is always greater than intent. And even if Meghan did not mean anything malicious or mean by that statement, or anything, non-innocuous by that statement, it doesn't mean that those of us who don't understand the subtext and the undertones of that statement would not be offended. And so just to put it into terms that maybe people might be able to relate to more strongly, what if these were two men talking? And one of the men was like, yeah, well, it wasn't until I took this job at Texaco. Is Texaco still even a company? I don't know. But it wasn't until I took this job at Texaco that I was treated like a woman in the workplace. That's when things really shifted. Anyway, back to being called a CEO. Like, what if that was the concept? What if you had two people and somebody brought up another term that we all know listening in tends to receive worse treatment? And in this situation, I'm talking about women in the workplace versus men. And they don't mean anything malicious by it. They just bring it up as an example and then they quickly drop it. I think the reaction to that would have been the same. Right? And so I think if you weren't offended by it, then maybe you're not offended, or maybe you don't feel particularly touched by the fact that in a lot of spaces, being treated like a full Black woman versus being treated like a mixed race Black woman means that you're treated worse. Now, that's not in every space, but in Meghan's situation, I do think that was the case. I do think, and somebody pointed this out to me in my DMs after I posted that video, but I do think that she did enjoy her life of ethnic ambiguity. Now, I never saw her and thought she was a white woman, but some people said that. I didn't even know Meghan was Black. How could you not know in some way? But I do think she enjoyed appearing ethnically ambiguous. I mean, it's constantly proven that when you're in Hollywood, that's the easiest way to get jobs. We just finished talking about Zendaya versus Keke Palmer and why so many people think of Zendaya as having a more successful career, and how I don't completely believe that colorism is the reason for that, but definitely the ethnic ambiguity and the way she presents herself. Keke Palmer presents herself as a Black woman. That's what she clearly identifies with. Whereas Zendaya, When I look at her and her roles, I don't say, oh, there's that Black girl in the role. I don't think of her that way. Not in the way she speaks, not in her love interests, not in the way she dresses. There are specific behaviors and characteristics that are coded as Black. Zendaya does not present any of those when she's on screen. And so I do think that the power to not have to present those things in order to have and be able to play characters that are considered to be valid and believable, I think that that is a privilege that people that present as ethnically ambiguous get to enjoy, whereas women that look like me don't get to enjoy that. And it's not necessary that you be able to enjoy that in order to be able to have a career. You look at people like Issa Rae and Quinta Bronson and Viola Davis. These are women who are Black women who play characters and who are very well known. But I do think that people who are ethnically ambiguous enjoy a certain type of privilege. And I do think that for Meghan Markle, when that was taken away from her, that was traumatizing. And so like I stated in the beginning of this video, my opinion, even after listening to the podcast, didn't change. I still, as a group of women who were in that group that she started being treated like once she dated Harry and things began to shift, I still wished that there had been a moment where somebody in that podcast recording could have been like, why don't you elaborate on that? And I think I heard it in Meghan's voice when she said that's when things really shifted. There was like a little pause and then but let's move on. Because I don't think that that was the time. I don't think that that was the time. And I also don't think she was speaking to the right person to expand on the nuances between being treated as a mixed race woman and being treated as a fully Black woman. Mariah Carey was not the person to talk to about that. They had their own universe of otherness to unlock. And I want to comment on that really quickly. The entire time I'm listening to Meghan talk, I'm like, damn. To have to carry so many things is a lot. And I started to joke to myself. I was like, she's like Meghan and the Technicolor Dreamcoat of otherness, growing up in this situation, having this, having that. And Mariah Carey, same thing. And so I think when you're listening to certain conversations, just as a person, you do have to sort of carry with you some protection sometimes. And I did state this in my pinned statement on that video. When I saw that statement and I saw who she was talking to, I realized, I said, maybe this is not the conversation for me. Because sometimes when people are in a safe space conversation, they're not always considerate of everybody's side of the story. They're not always going to have time to dive into this nuance and that nuance. And so I think as a person who was offended by that statement, what I had to understand was, this wasn't the conversation to expand on it. It doesn't mean I was not right and my feelings were not valid to be offended. It just means that I extend a little bit of grace because it just wasn't the time to expand. And I wasn't alone in my offense. Somebody shared this with me a couple hours literally after I posted. And I also saw this written in other places. I've seen people talking about this on TikTok. I think anybody who is a fully presenting Black person and has been in situations where they've been made to feel that their Blackness is less valuable because it's more apparent, I think hearing that would have been offensive. I think if you haven't been in that situation, then no, it just rolled right off your back. But I wasn't the only person that caught it. And I'm excited that Don Lemon, as problematic as he might be, I'm excited that he commented as well because something needed to be said. And I do wish that she had my I do wish she'd taken a moment, but I also understand, like I stated earlier, it wasn't the time. So yes, I did listen to the episode. My opinion still stands. She really experienced a new level of stress and horror when people treated her as a full-on Black woman. But I also think other things went into that as well to sort of make that period of her life just very stressful. I think I left the podcast experience with Meghan, though, feeling very grateful that she has had, even though she hasn't had my othering experience, she's had it in another way. Because you have some people that have just never been made to feel like they're on the outside at all. And it impacts how they relate to other people and the message that they choose to put forward. And keeping that in mind, I want to talk about the episode that she made with Mindy Kaling. So I'm listening to the Mariah episode. I finished it up and I'm like, well, I'm not mad at her anymore, but I also still stand on my statement, and I do wish she had elaborated, but it wasn't the time. However, this right here, this Mindy show, okay, well now I feel like, she's almost back to 100 with me, because talking to Mindy Kaling about becoming a single mom by choice is like, for me, it's like somebody interviewing, I don't know, Paula Abdul on choreography or something. I don't know. But I don't know why I said Paula Abdul. Maybe because I was thinking of Janet Jackson, but I was like, Paula Abdul was her choreographer. Anyway, when I was growing up in the early 2010s, so when I was like in my adulthood, there were 2 writers that really mattered to me. Well, 3. The first one, obviously Shonda Rhimes, because she took just prime time by storm. And I don't know where you were when the finale of season 2, Grey's Anatomy, aired and that Snow Patrol started playing. Do it all, anything. And Izzy is on the bed and she's in that prom dress and she's crying. And then at the end, Bert gets shot. I had tears rolling down my face. I was slobbering. It was the best season of television I had ever seen in my life. And everybody was talking, and I was still in college at the time. And so to see that this Black woman had come out and she was taking over, and I mean, she would go on to create so many shows. And she was really just such an example, but she was always very serious. And I was always more of a goofy, a silly, goofy girl in a silly, goofy mood. And so the next writer who meant a lot to me was Tina Fey, especially the way that she went from being behind the camera to on camera to behind and on the camera simultaneously. A lot of people that I knew at that time of life were like, oh, that's going to be your future. And then it was Mindy Kaling. And no, I know I didn't say Issa Rae, but Issa was after all of these people, because if you think about it, Awkward Black Girl didn't happen until 2010. By 2010, we'd had 5 years of 30 Rock. We'd had 5 years of Grey's Anatomy. And Mindy Kaling had been on The Office and been a head writer for The Office for about 5 years as well. So, this was some time. But Mindy was important to me because I saw myself in Mindy. Darker skinned girl, maybe not the most attractive person, from the suburbs, funny girl, and able to, I saw myself. And when she would write about her issues that she was having, like with dating, with this, with that, I was like, somebody gets it who's been able to become really successful. Now, unlike Mindy, I was not super ambitious and I was much more sensitive. So the things that were said to me and the things that happened while I was growing up, like definitely snagged me and like held me down. And at the end of the day, I wanted my domestic life to be more sussed out than my professional life. And so, I definitely, I only went so far, but I still was always rooting for her and I always saw myself in her. And when I heard her on the show with Meghan and she was talking about her decision to become a single mom by choice, I remembered that when she first announced she was pregnant a couple years ago, that in my mind, I was like, that is my role model. To be somebody who, because she's been very open about the struggle of meeting someone. If you let women in their 30s talk, they will tell you, like, it's tough, right? She's been very open about that. And when she decided to become a mom on her own, I remember, like, I was so excited. I was so excited for her. And, parentage of the children aside, because that's her business and she's very private about that. What I loved about it was she was in a financial position to be able to really take care of them and to be able to really, like, the kids would lack for nothing. And I think a lot of the times when you think about people being single moms, especially in the Black community, it's such a scourge on your existence or on the existence of the person who chooses that, because of the idea of resources and how they're going to lack resources and the kids won't have this and they won't have that. And what I loved about Mindy was, she's very successful, very rich, and able to just provide and do what she needs to do for these children that she desires and wants to have. And then when she had the second one at 40 years old and she had them during a pandemic and very quietly so, I was like, that's ideal. just being able to make that decision for your life and not have to wait on having, whomever by your side. I just thought it was incredibly powerful. And the episode that she's on with Meghan, she's talking about just the stigma of being single and becoming a single mom by choice. And I don't think her and Meghan's lives could have turned out any differently. Like, even though they're both able to come together and talk about these shared moments of pop culture reality, which I think is so interesting because I forget that like Meghan Markle is my generation. Like when she was talking to Mariah Carey, she was like, oh my gosh, I remember seeing you in ABCD. And I'm like, I remember that. And when she's talking about like certain movies and, when she talks to Mindy, she talks about Bridget Jones, because I remember seeing Bridget Jones when I was in high school. I had the soundtrack. I watched it all the time. And I remember thinking and like laughing along with the rest of the world, like, ha ha ha, single in your 30s. What a loser. But when she brings that up consistently in the video, I'm just like, in the podcast, I'm just like, man, we was all really growing up at the same time. But Meghan, as you can see, clearly her life unfolded in a much different way than Mindy's. But I do think because of her experience being on the outside of things, she talks about growing up and how she was an outsider and how she didn't have anybody to sit with at lunch, and how because of that, and this is Meghan talking, she decided to become like the presidents of organizations and stuff so that, she didn't have anybody to sit with at lunch, but now she's going to meetings. And Mindy, when she hears that, she gets emotional. And when I heard that, I got emotional too, because that was me in high school. I remember thinking during my first games, like cheering, I remember thinking I used to be so sad and so nervous about who I would sit with at the game. And now they're all here to watch me perform. Very egotistical, but it was just this idea that I don't have to ask you for permission into your social structures anymore. I've made this for myself and I can enjoy this in my own way. And so when Meghan said that, I was like, whoa, like we have that in common. And Mindy had the same thing. She was like, that was me too. Like I was on the outside and I had to figure out, how do I get in? And Mindy could not believe, if you haven't listened to it, Mindy could not believe that Meghan had ever been on the outside. She just couldn't believe it. And Meghan Markle's trying to convince her. She's like, yeah, I had frizzy hair, which is interesting, which goes back to that race thing, because I'd always wondered about Meghan Markle's hair. And, you see pictures of her when she was younger and pictures of her now. And it's like, girl, like, do you have any connection to black hair at all? And I think for Meghan, her connection is, it's shame. She talks about it in the episode with Mariah. They talk about like hair, issues. And Mariah says, your kid is lucky because she's got the black mom. And Meghan's like, oh God, but my hair was such an issue. And at one point they're talking about hair products, and Meghan brings up Murray's pomade, which if you don't know, Murray's is like old school, like whatever. Mariah laughs because she brings that up. But the point is that for Meghan, her hair was a big issue and to why she didn't feel like she fit in. So I'd always wondered if we were ever going to see Meghan Markle's natural hair. I think the answer is no. I don't think she ever will. But anyway, in the podcast, Meghan's trying to convince Mindy, like, I know what it's like. Like, I had a gap in my teeth. I had frizzy hair. Like, it was just, and then I just grew up. And Mindy is like trying to like keep from crying, because anytime you felt that, and Mindy describes, growing up and feeling a certain way about herself, and how that lack of being accepted as like a pretty woman is a wound that she'll always carry with her. And I'm like, girl, have you been on my YouTube channel? Woo! But anyway, Mindy's like, it's crazy for me to look at you now and to think we would have that in common. And I'm just so grateful that you were open about that. And I was thinking the same thing too. I was like, damn, I never would have expected, like, I've seen pictures of Meghan when she was younger, but all that stuff about not feeling like you belonged and like you didn't have anybody to sit with, like, And so in conclusion, that particular episode sort of brought me back to a situation where I was looking at Meghan Markle, and my parasocial relationship with her was restored. I think that's something important to keep in mind, that whenever we hear celebrities, actresses, actors, media personalities, YouTubers, whenever we hear something that they say and we don't agree with it or we don't like it, what we're really responding to is our idea of them that we had in our heads, because we don't know everything about them. And we don't understand because we haven't been there. We don't understand where they're really coming from. our parasocial relationship with them is affected because we're like, whoa, I thought of you in this way and now you're reacting this way. And I see it all the time in my comment section. People will be like, I like you, but I didn't like this. And I was having the same reaction to Meghan Markle, to that line of that podcast. Hey, I appreciate you uncovering this and talking about this, but I didn't like this comment. And it's changed my parasocial relationship with you because at first we were two Black women, in this together. Please, people do it all the time, okay? People think that way about celebrities and things all the time. I'm not weird for that. Leave me alone. But, I was protecting another Black woman. I was protecting her honor when I would defend her. Anytime I would think about her, I was like, go, Black woman, go. But you come out and said, well, I was never treated as a Black woman because honestly, I'm not Black. I'm biracial. And that shifted her parasocial relationship with me. Oh, wait. What? Okay. And I think listening more to the episodes and especially her conversation with Mindy, especially when they talk about childhood, I was like, I may not be able to identify with her when it comes to race and how we are treated, when it comes to how people evaluate us and evaluate our worthiness based on our phenotypic representation. But that feeling of being an outsider and that feeling of being othered because you are an outsider is universal. No matter how you got there, once you feel it, you feel it. And in that way, it was almost like I began to understand that I wanted to support her in a new and different way. So hopefully what I just said made sense. I know I said a lot, but yeah, I definitely listened to the podcast. And even though my opinion and the fact that I was disappointed in what she said and offended by what she said, that didn't change. However, after listening to her work and understanding what she's trying to do, I hope that her podcast is successful because I think it's important to have a place to come to talk about situations where you have felt like an outsider. And it's not as beautiful of a word as archetypes, but honestly, her show should have been called Othered. Like, honestly, because I think every episode, we'll have to see, but every episode is going to deal with this theme in one way or another. Hey, how have you been othered? I think that's a question that she's going to ask, and she's going to ask it and answer it through the representation of specific archetypes. And so she has a fan again. Hello, I'm back. And I will be listening because I enjoy hearing people that I respect and kind of hold up on a pedestal for whatever reason. I enjoy them taking a moment to sit back and say, well, actually, this is what's behind this facade. This is what really lies at the core of kind of things I do. And a lot of times what lies at the core of, I think even that ambition to like want to stand out is at one point feeling like you were outside. And that is something that I understand deeply. So again, wanted to follow up. I hope my initial reaction is clear, and I hope that this reaction is clear. And if it's not, I know you guys will let me know in the comments. So as always, thanks for watching.